It's August 14th, 2015. I'm Sue Cohen, and today we have the pleasure of interviewing two very wonderful young ladies that were born in San Marcos, and they're going to share with us their memories of San Marcos and living here. We have Rose Brooks and Ollie Giles. So let's start with you, Rose. Tell us when you were born and where you were born and a little bit about your early years.
I was born in Redwood on a farm to Clint and Sophronia Kirk. I was born at home. My grandmother delivered me. You know that. She did a lot of that. And I played on the farm. Went to school in Staples, the first grade. The yellow bus passed me by. I had 3 older brothers, and they would pat me on their back. I was real tiny like I am now, because I had a tumor under my arm when I was, I guess 1 or 2. It was real big. And the school was next door to the church, and that's where I went to school. When I came to San Marcos and lived with my grandparents behind my uncle and auntie on Comel Street. It's 306 Comel Street. It's right. They had a Kirk's Cafe at that time. And I started to school, to the colored school, which now is called Dunbar, but it was the colored school. We had high school, all the grades went to that school where Dunbar is located now. And I would have to walk, which wasn't very fun. And I would have to walk back at lunch to eat my lunch. And my dad and mama finally moved into town, bought a house on 311 Shady Lane, which is across street over Comel and Center Street.
And Comel is now Martin Luther King Street.
It's now Martin Luther King.
And you were just one girl with 3 brothers?
I was one girl with 3 brothers. When I turned 18, my mom had a little boy that died at 2 months old. His name was Clint Kirk Jr. And a year later, she had my sister, Linda. She's married, Linda Kirk Kendrick. And I was washing her diapers because I was getting ready to finish high school and my mama had her. So I only have one sister.
So you finished high school there at the Dunbar School, went all 12 grades there?
I finished out of the building that they call Mitchell Center. I finished high school in 1953, and I always wanted to go to college, but I couldn't go to Southwest Texas then, right? And so...
And why couldn't you go?
Because they didn't allow us to go at that time.
They didn't allow African Americans. It
Right,
was all white.
Right, it was all white. And so I went to Houston-Tillotson, and I worked my way through school. I graduated in business administration in 1958.
Wow.
I worked my way through, worked in a restaurant called Southern Dinette on 11th Street. I started out staying with a lady named Miss Lewis on 12th Street, and she was real strict. But anyway, finally I moved upstairs over the restaurant, and I made $12 a week, and I paid $5 rent, but I got to eat free, and I made very good tips. At that time, they tipped 10 cents, you know. So,
wow.
And then sometimes I did talk too bad, and they called me little country girl. So I would tell them, you can keep your dime, because I'm not a little country girl, you know, get kind of ugly with them. But they had boat-head soldiers would come in there, because, you know, they couldn't go downtown to the fine restaurant.
So that restaurant
So they would come in there and they would tip really good. So
that was for blacks only also, the restaurant.
Yeah.
That was all this was before, a large part of your life was before segregation
right.
was segregated. Before They desegregated. What's it called? Yeah.
Integration.
Integrated. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word. I'm sorry. Ollie. Okay, Ollie. Now y'all are the same age. You're both just you're.
She's older than me.
Ollie just had a birthday last
August
week
5th,
and turned.
82.
And Rose is.
My birthday will be Tuesday on the 18th.
And you'll be
And I will
82
turn
also.
82.
Wow. So where were you born? Ollie,
I
tell
was
us about.
born in San Marcos, Texas, and I was born at home. The doctor would come to our house, and because we didn't have a wing at the hospital, and he come to our house, and Dr. Wilburn, and my grandmother said he would come in, and he birthed the baby, slap you on your little, can I say ass?
Yes.
Slap you on your little ass and said, name the little nigga Wilburn. And they did. And it's more little Wilburns running around. I'm Ollie Wilburn. She got a brother named Wilburn. And it's more little Wilburns running around. So
And Dr. Wilburn was an Anglo?
Yes. Yeah, he was Caucasian. And I just use W. I do not use Wilburn. I use Ollie W. And my uncle was a teacher at the colored school, Edward Hollins, and he taught my cousin and I. My grandmother just had the 2 grandchildren. I didn't have any sisters or brothers, and my grandmother only had 3 children. My mother had 2 brothers, and my uncle taught us at home, and he taught school. And when I was 5 years old, I started to school. I went out to the colored school. And I told them I was 5 at home and 6 at school. And I knew the work. And so they let me stay in school. And then when I was 8 years old, but my grandmother had a spar rotten. My grandmother never worked out. She always had her own business. She did home laundry. And she had 3 women working for her. My grandfather...
Where did your grandparents live?
In San Marcos on Valley Street. And my grandfather drove the truck for Southern Grocery Company. He would deliver groceries all around. Sometimes we'd get in the truck with him, ride to Luling and around. And my cousin, my brother had just the 1 child, so Mama just had 2 grandchildren. And sometimes we would get in the truck and ride around with Papa. And Southern Grocery Company made a coffee. They came up with a coffee and named it Almost Coffee. And they have his picture on the bag, coffee bag, and the coffee can.
That's your grandfather?
My grandfather, Almost, and they named it Almost Coffee. And so my grandmother used to have a restaurant before she started her home laundry, because she never worked out. She tried to work for a woman one time, and she wasn't used to working out and cleaning up people's houses. And she went to this woman's house to clean it, and she cleaned the bathroom. And then when she got ready to use the bathroom, the woman told her she had to go out in the yard. Said, "You can't go in the bathroom." My grandmother said, "Oh, no, I don't." And my grandmother walked off. She never went back. And that's when she started her own business, a little cafe.
Where was that?
The cafe was on Center Street. And it was a 2-story house now. Sister Brown, they called her Sister Brown, had the upstairs. My grandmother had a little cafe. And the African Americans that went to the university to perform, they could go and perform and act and everything. And they would come down to my grandmother's little cafe and eat. Sister Brown made up beds upstairs so they could have somewhere to sleep.
Wow.
And that was a little hotel like upstairs.
You can see where there were lots of businesses on Center Street.
Yes, yes it was.
Some of them are still there, the buildings.
Yes.
There's no businesses, but they look like grocery stores.
And the university, the African Americans had to go to the university, and I've got dockets and programs to show it. I mean, research. And they had to get that teacher's certificate. When you go up to Old Main, the building sitting over here was for the colored teachers, so that they could get their degrees to teach. And they
in the colored schools.
No, in the university. Well, it was Teachers College.
Right.
Southwest.
But it was still segregated on the college.
And I've got documents. They let me go through the archives at the university and gave me copies of all of this. And they were able to teach then, and I've got the names of the teachers that were up there. And then when I was 8 years old, before I was 8, my mother married again because she and my father had separated. Because after I was born, we lived in Austin. And I was around my great-grandmother for a while. And then Mother and Daddy separated, and they got a divorce, and we moved back to San Marcos. Then Mother married again. That's when I moved to California when I was 8. And when I went to school in California, being used to a colored school, and when I went to California, the school that I had to go to, I was the only little colored girl in the whole school.
So they were integrated before Texas.
California, yeah. California been integrated.
Wow.
I was in Oakland in the Bay Area, and they've been integrated.
How many kids in that school?
It was a bunch.
And you were the only one.
And I looked around, and I said, Lord, what's all these white folks gonna do to me? And they came and hugged me, and they welcomed me, and I realized we're no different. We're all the same. The only thing is the pigmentation of the skin. Honey, and I got right in there with them, and that's the reason I'm like I am today. I'm not bashful. And when I came back to Texas, hey, watch me, honey. I'm from California, baby. And
because San Marcos was slow to integrate.
Well, when I
mean,
got
they
here,
had to make them integrate, is my understanding.
well, when I got in, when I came back,
No, is that?
I think they had a peaceful integration.
They didn't do it on their
I
own
don't think
volition.
they were
It was
made. I
when the
think-
law changed.
I think they were better than most towns, small towns around, as I
Okay.
can remember.
Okay.
because when I came back from California, I had 5 children, and my children were all born in California, and they were not used to segregation. And so when we started the school here, the schools here had just begun to integrate. And my oldest daughter, she was so further advanced, they wanted to skip her 3 grades. Her father was in California, and I told him. He said, oh no, 2 grades is enough, but he didn't want her to be skipped. That's the reason she finished high school as early as she did. One of my sons, he could not. One of the teachers, I think it was because they wanted to hold their jobs, the African American teachers, and one of them failed my son, and one of my sons, and David passed, but Michael, they held him back, and that really hurt Michael because we knew Michael was doing his work the way he should. And that's when he said, I don't need this, and he called his daddy. And we put him on a plane, and he went on back to California to school, and that's where he was raised, went to school, graduated in California and everything, because he did not like the schools here. And so then David and Latrice finished school when she was 16, I believe, or 17. And then she went on off to college. She became a registered nurse, and she was the head nurse there at Brackenridge in Austin. And then David, he finished school and he married her, and then he went on back to California. And Larry is in Georgia now, and Michael and David are back in California. They back home.
Wow. 5 kids, that's amazing.
And because see, I had 7. I married again. The second time I married an older man. I got my divorce from my first husband. And then I met this older man, and he was Dr. Bell.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought the man had some money. And he asked me to marry him. Yeah, honey, he had this big, nice house and all of this, and I was riding around in a Cadillac, and yeah, I'll marry you. And so I married him, moved to Seguin, And I'd be darned if I didn't have twins.
That made it 7. Now you moved to Austin and got your degree. And how did you end up back in San Marcos, Rose?
Well, I got married while I was in school. I think I married a year before I graduated.
Where was he
married a military guy.
Okay.
He was from Florida, and I moved back home. Then I went to Clovis, New Mexico, and stayed a little while. But I had 2 children, my older daughter and my son. And then I got pregnant in Clovis, and then I came home, and I never did follow my husband anymore. You know, I just stayed in San Marcos, and my children all went to San Marcos High School. They all 3 graduated from San Marcos High School. They all 3 went to some parts of college. Michelle has a business. She's been in business for some 30 years. And Reuben can kind of do a little of everything.
They're both here still in San Marcos.
They're both still here.
Mm-hmm.
My older daughter lives in Austin. She retired from the city after 27 years in being a supervisor in the electric utility part. And she has 1 daughter, Camille. She graduated, I guess, she's about 38. She graduated from Baylor University, and she works for IRS. She's been with them for about 15 years, I think.
So when you moved back with your parents, or into the same neighborhood?
I moved back in with my parents,
Okay.
and then finally, it's kind of crowded when you got 3 women in the house. So I finally moved out, and I bought a house that I still have at 308 Magnolia.
Right.
And with my 3 children, and it's
And
still there.
And you moved back with on Valley Street, right? Where did you live when you moved back, Ollie?
When I moved back, I lived on Center Street. But I didn't move back until after my children was up in school and everything. And when I was in California, I went through elementary, junior high, and high school. And my high school classmates, we used to stay in touch, Albany High.
What year did you graduate?
A lot, I don't remember.
Rose, well, you probably remember. Y'all both graduated the same year, probably. High school?
I graduated in 1953.
That's right.
Yeah.
So when you came back to San Marcos, you found it very changed?
Yeah.
And you talk about some of the changes you found when you came back.
Well, when I came back, I have been used to everything integrated. And when I came back, they were beginning to integrate here. They were beginning to do that. And some of it I wasn't used to. And I never had to work. Never. I was an only child, and I was a spoiled brat. And I didn't like for anybody to see me in the same thing twice, even all through high school. And so...
Only child was pretty unusual back then, too, right?
Honey, all I had to do was say, but I won't get that for that baby. And I would get it. And then when my mother married again, after we moved to California, my stepfather hated him. My stepfather said, there's no sense in you buying that child all that stuff and let her wear the same things twice and everything. Because I had my own credit card. And I was in high school. When I got out of school, when I would go out of school, I would go downtown with my credit card and get me a whole new outfit for tomorrow and charge it. New shoes and everything.
That kind of explains a lot about your spunkiness today, huh?
Probably so.
I won't ask you the question, what chores did you have as a kid at home? I won't ask you that. I could ask Rose that.
Because I was a spoiled brat. All I had to do is say, but I won't get that for that baby. And my grandmother was like that, but I won't get that for that baby. And my mother and my stepfather tried to put a stop to it, and he didn't want me to have nothing new.
Couldn't stop him, I don't think.
One day he was gonna try. You know, I don't get spankings, and one day he had me. I couldn't go out to play with the other children, and you know, during the summertime that school was at, and so he came home. They forgot to lock me in because my mother worked, and he came home, and I was outdoors playing with the other children, and that's when he was gonna spank me, gonna whoop me, I guess.
But he didn't.
Honey, I snatched that belt out of his hand, and I tried to knock the hell out of him. And
That explains a lot, I tell you.
I got ready to run in my room because I had my own room, and he came in there, and just when he got almost in the door, I shut the door on him. Boom, and he went.
That's
He let me
crazy.
alone.
I bet he did. Now, when you were growing up in San Marcos, did you have any jobs as a teenager? Did you work outside the home, or?
I think I'm trying to remember on San Antonio Street. I can't remember. I cleaned house when I was about 13 or so. And I'm a pretty good cleaner because my mama and my grandmama taught me how to wash dishes, how to clean and do all of that. And I used to pick cotton too with my brothers. I would, they would go out West Texas to pull cotton with Frank Arredondo's granddaddy. He used to haul people to West Texas to pull cotton. They were real good, especially my brother that's the survivor. He's 87. He lives over on Gravel Street now. He and I talked about the other day when we were growing up and how he used to pack me on his back. And then I told him, I say, my mama couldn't leave you and myself at home with the other two boys because she would be bossing them and fighting them. So she would take us to shop in town with her. And he said, you know, sister, one time I tried to brand you like the cows, you know how they do on the farm, brand them. And he said, boy, I got a bad spanking for that. So at his 87 years, you know, he's remembering all of that. He just lost 2 children in less than a year. He lost the daughter August the 3rd of this year, and his son last year in October. So he and I have been, you know, doing a lot of talk about our growing up and all of this. So,
And his last name is Kirk?
his name is Wilbert Kirk. He did all the paving. I'm sure you remember.
What's his first name?
Wilbert Kirk.
Okay.
He
Oh,
lived
right,
on
the same-
Gravel Street. He used to do a lot of paving for the paint.
He's named after the doctor.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe I think he was delivered
Yeah,
by
he was
that
one of
doctor.
them Wilburns.
Dr. Wilbur.
I have never heard that about Dr. Wilburn. That's a good
You had
one.
never heard that?
No, must be true.
Yeah, well, he always had a business. Wilbur didn't work for nobody else.
And he lived here his whole life, 87 years.
Yeah, well, he came shortly after I did to San Marcos. He got married when he was young and had the three kids.
People used to get married young back then.
Yeah, he was about 20.
You going to college was pretty radical, really.
It really was.
I mean, at that time to leave town and go to college, a lot of African American girls, that just wasn't an option.
Well, we had quite a few that maybe a little younger than I am that did, you know, after Texas, Southwest Texas integrated. Then you had quite a few that
was in the
attend
60s.
and graduate.
With integration
See,
was-
it's been 50 years ago. It must have been 65. It's been 50
Because the
years.
civil right, Johnson signed
Yeah.
the Civil Rights Bill 50 years ago this month, right?
Well, he signed the voters' right
Voters'
was
right.
50 years. You know, where we could, you know, vote.
Y'all
And
are both real active in politics. Remember the first time you voted?
Well, we were paying poll tax then. The first time I voted when I was in Austin in school. So everybody know I'm real political.
Everybody had to pay the poll tax, the Anglos
yeah,
and the
was it
blacks,
70 or dollar and something,
to vote.
75
Everybody had to
cents
pay.
or
I don't
something.
know. I was.
You were in California, where it was
Well,
easy
I-
life,
oh,
apparently.
Yeah.
Easy Street,
You don't look
California.
at the color of a person's skin, you look at the person. And that's where I came up, in my high school and everything. Elementary, junior high, and high school.
You came back to San Marcos and started making waves, and you're still waving.
I
That's
sure
good.
am. I sure am. And
That's
I
good.
love history. I love the true history, the
Right.
true African American history right here
Right.
in San Marcos, because we didn't all come here as poor folks, as slaves. And City Cemetery, I let everybody know, we used to own that. We sold it to the city. We, African Americans.
Yeah, I went up there to that tour that y'all had.
And so yeah, I love history. And my grandmother used to say, leave it alone, you're going to say something you don't want, but I do. I say, I'm being honest, I tell the truth about it.
Yeah,
And I've had the Washington Post to come down and interview me and everything.
yeah,
And I took them out of the cemetery and gave them the history.
that's
And I've
good.
been on Channel 12, and because I want true history to be told about the African Americans and what we did
Right.
here
Right.
in San Marcos and in Texas. Yeah, in Austin, how we had our own colleges, our own schools, and everything. So, and our
That's
own
good.
homes. And some
Right.
of us had our own businesses, like my grandmother.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you remember something outstanding in politics? You've been involved in politics for years here. Do you remember something?
Well, I remember Bob Barton the first time that they wanted to send me as a delegate. And Bob stood up and he said...
Bob who?
Bob Barton. He said, you're going to have to send Rose now. You're going to have to vote for Rose to go. And I can't remember what year that was. but
And that
it's
was to
been
the
quite
Democratic
some-
convention?
Yeah. It's been quite some time. I've been to 7 National Democratic Conventions. I couldn't go to the first one for Obama because it was a black lady from New Braunfels. She just stopped working in Washington, D.C. Haven't been here. Haven't been to get nobody out to vote. But I guess she was a little smooth talker than myself. So she got to go to the first inauguration. I mean, the first.
You went to the
national.
inauguration. I remember
Yeah,
that.
I've been to 3 times. I've been to Obama's 2 times, and I've been to Bill Clinton's last time.
Do you remember anything local politics that was big here in San Marcos, or scandalous, or
I
earth-breaking?
remember the school one time I got and testified, and I had to turn my back, but I barely can remember that. I think it was Bagley was the principal. There was something going on at the school, and I was very vocal in what they were doing. That was one thing. And then with Ophia Philo, Vasquez, or whatever, I used to work with her in community action, and she kept me involved. We did some stuff at Southwest Texas too, the way the people that worked in the cafeteria, the way they were treated and stuff. We were up there, I think I got some clippings if I can go back and...
Because both of you
find
ladies are activists of sorts.
She was, you
Yeah,
know,
I like history more than I do politics.
Oh, you're an activist too, Ollie. Don't
Yeah, I
kid
am.
yourself.
I am.
I've
Because
seen
I
you.
had to go and tell them off at Texas State University, Southwest Texas. Okay. I sure
and
did.
it's actually the
I got an
same.
African American professor in there too.
That's good. And y'all are both active in your church. What church do you go to?
Jackson Chapel.
Johnson Church.
Y'all both go to the same
Methodist
church.
We both go to the same church. I
And that's
grew
one
up
of
in
the
that
early. Tell us about the history of that church a little bit. Isn't that one of the? It has a historical marker outside of, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it does.
And it's one of the earliest black Methodist church. I
No,
don't want to get it wrong.
Wesley Chapel.
Sorry.
Wesley Chapel.
Wesley Chapel was the oldest, and they used to meet, and I've got documents, They used to meet down there at Purgatory Creek, because they didn't have a church, and they called it the, oh, come on around. They had a church down there. And
Like under a tent, or
no,
they had a building?
They called it, what was it called when they didn't have a building, and when it rained or anything, they had church in someone's home, and then it'll come back around, the church that was over there. And then the pastor was what you call the pastor that go from county to county to preach, the circuit preacher. And he would come here and go down to the creek there and pastor, I got it in my books, and then going around there, and Reverend, I have it, and he saw the property up there for sale on Center Street. Caucasians used to own it, and he called them and told them that what we would pay, and that's when they had the church, little church built up there on Center Street. And then the Smith brothers came in and built the building that we're in now, the Lord Smith's Critters.
About what year was that?
I don't remember. I got all of that written down.
Roughly.
They finished it.
1925.
No. They
The brush
finished the
shop.
building in the 60s.
Brush shop.
But it's on the
64,
same
I think.
location as the
Yes.
second church was? The first church was on Purgatory.
That was the, okay, the first church was the First Baptist Church, that big First Baptist Church there.
Yes.
And then they had the other little church. And the big First Baptist Church, that's where the seniors had to go and graduate, because they didn't have an auditorium for the African American seniors, and they would graduate up there at the First Baptist Church. And we used to have, I remember when
Is that where you graduated?
I graduated out. That was earlier.
that was
before
early.
my time, probably with
okay.
Margaret Hill.
Yeah, when my
people
uncle
like
and
that.
all of them
Okay.
were coming up. And
They're a
I've
little
got,
older than I am.
yeah, and I've got history of that and the names of the ones. And I remember before we moved to California, we had a little wedding, what you call those weddings?
Mark Wayne.
Huh? Yeah, because I married, oh heck, this little boy, and we had to go, we had the program up at First Baptist Church, because our church was too small. I used to go to Wesley, AME Church, African Methodist Church, because that one was there also. And we had our little Tom Thumb wedding up
Yeah,
there.
that's what it was.
And
What is
the
a Tom Thumb wedding?
where the little children go and say, I do. And
I'm
then,
not familiar with that tradition.
and then we had a church, okay, and then we had a church there, you know where the restaurant is across the street from that big First Baptist Church? It used to be a church there. Mr. and
What
Reverend
street?
Grant and Mrs. Grant had that.
On what street now?
It
What's the
was
street
Kamel
now?
Street, it's Martin Luther King.
Okay.
And it was a church there. And it was a little Protestant church there. Reverend Grant and Miss Grant, Professor Grant's parents, had that building there, that church there. And it said that the teacher was the preacher. And I went to Washington and went through the National Archives and found where they had that church there. And they sent some of the Buffalo soldiers there and told them to watch, because the people did not feel secure there in the church. And we had soldiers there on Center Street watching it. I'm telling you, I was bringing my stuff with me. But
Yes.
Now, were you here during the World War II, Rose? Where you were living here? You were in California.
Uh-huh.
But during World War II, with the calaboose, do you remember
My
that?
uncle ran the USO because, you know, the colored soldiers couldn't
They
go
had-
anywhere else, so they had that open.
That's where
which
the
is
African
Calaboose
American
now.
Museum
My
is
uncle
now.
ran it. He's the one that had Kirk's Cafe, so they hired him to run the USO.
And was
And then we would have little dances, and, you know, I was like about 18 during that time.
yeah, because it used to be a jail. and where they would put the African Americans in jail, and it's a dungeon down under there. And then they put the jail down there where Dairy Queen, not Dairy Queen.
Fried chicken, the golden
Chick-
fried
yeah,
chicken.
Golden Fried. It
Chicken.
used to be a jail there.
Yeah.
And Sonny Johns, he had a service station, African American. He had a service station there. And then where the cleaning, it was a African American tailor shop there. And Sonny Johns would bootleg liquor from his service station.
Service station.
And the jail was over here.
Right under their noses.
And when they get ready to do a research, the sheriff would go there and let them know that we're going to have to do a search, and so he could hide his liquor.
Wow. That was right there on Martin Luther King. Well, all the businesses that were over in that Dunbar area that were segregated for the African Americans weren't allowed to go to the other businesses, but could Anglos go to the African American?
African Americans go to the business. When we went to the movie theaters, we had to go upstairs and sit. We go in the front door, but we had to
Like
go
in the
upstairs.
Holiday Theater, they had a...
Yeah.
But yeah, we had, and then we had businesses where the city recreation center is across from the cock house. Because African Americans used to own the cock house, and I told them I wanted them to be given credit because the changes that was made, African American family did that. And across the street at the city building, it used to be a building there, and the man that worked over there was, he had his own tailor shop and everything right there where that building is. And all along there, African Americans owned it.
Now, when y'all were little kids, did y'all swim and play in the river?
I wasn't allowed to go near the water.
And I left when I was 8.
See, all the Anglo kids grew up playing in the river,
Yeah,
but y'all,
they
where
did.
did y'all play? Or why did y'all, the river wasn't part of your growing up?
Maybe my brothers, not
Yeah.
me. My mother was very protective of me.
Yeah. And me
I
being
didn't
an
play
only
with a lot
child.
of kids. I only had a few. She didn't believe in, I think I had one cousin that could come spend the night with me. She didn't believe in us bringing people in to spend the night
heavens
either,
no.
like people do now.
It was
You
very...
know, that's why you have so many different things happen.
I guess when y'all were growing up, did y'all have a telephone in your house?
Oh, yeah.
Was it a party line, or was it a
Well,
regular
my grandmother
telephone?
had an old
Were you
phone.
here in San Marcos?
One of those, not like
did.
Because the
today's
phone company, you used to have to go through an operator.
Yeah, you have to go
The
through
phone
that
company
way.
used to be up there where, down the street here.
On the Senate, there's a plaque on the building.
Used to
Yeah,
be the phone company.
it was on the square here.
On the square.
Sure did.
We just had our Dunbar ex-students reunion July the 18th.
Okay, tell me about
and,
that.
We called it a walk down memory lane because we only had 2 streets, remember? Maybe 3. We had Valley Street, Center Street, and Comel Street. That was our main street.
The areas that y'all
The areas
could
where-
go.
Yeah, because we had homes up there on San Antonio Street. African Americans, the whatchamacallit family. San Antonio, and then back over here. What? Oh, I
But
got
the main
all of that.
area,
But
The
the
school-
main area during the school time. So, but my grandson furnished his Skyline party bus, a tour bus charter for us to ride on. So
and look at the old neighborhoods.
we went all over the neighborhood. We passed by the cock house where the Bullisons live, Frank and Ruben L. Bullison and their children. Down CM Allen, it used to be nothing but black families live there too. So we went by like where the First National Bank, not Frost Bank, but it was a state bank, and Dukeland areas, and just kind of around. And it was kind of interesting, like on Mitchell Street, it used to be housing, low rent housing, and it was, they really did enjoy it. Then
People
We
came
were
from
able-
all over, people that had moved away that went to Dunbar.
we
How many
had
did y'all have?
people we had more people than we usually have had. It was well organized. We had about 12 people. It was really my idea to try to keep it going. 'Cause
Yeah.
we have lost a lot of people through death, like Margaret Hill was
Right.
a big supporter. But my daughter, her daughter, all these young people that did attend Dunbar, as you know, in the elementary school, they decided they want to help. So we had a band, we had picture taking.
So people came from other states all over,
we
back
had,
to San
we had
Marcos.
people from South Carolina, Michigan, California. They came from all over. And they want us to do it next year, but that's a lot of planning. It's okay for you to get a plane ticket and come here, but what about the people that is playing in it? You know, so
Gotta
we're
keep
gonna
that
do
history alive. Ollie's dying to say something, Ollie,
Yes, I
before you
am.
forget.
Yes,
What is
I am.
it?
I wanted to say that Dunbar neighborhood is not the only one the African Americans live.
Okay.
We lived on Ranch Road 12. It used to be Blanco Road.
Uh-huh.
All along there was a Negro colony. Free Negroes lived there. And that's the reason the African Americans owned where the cemetery is. Peyton Roberts got the first Mexican land grant. And back there they had the homes and things, and kind of up front they would raise their...
Roughly what years did that happen? Roughly.
Roughly it happened
Give us
when they was giving out the first Mexican land grants.
Like way back in the 1800s.
1800s.
Okay.
Well, that's before our time.
Yeah, but I still got the history.
So when San Marcos was originally settled, the blacks were in other places, but later on,
No,
and
the
the-
African Americans always been scattered all over the place. All out there on Hunter Road and everywhere. And a lot of us came in here with some of the first settlers free. The first Caucasian and African American settlers came in here together. And Ranch Road 12 used to be Blanco Road and all along there. And I've got the names of the African Americans that lived all along there. Peyton Roberts got the first Mexican land grant. And they started selling to the Caucasian people, because you had the cemetery over there where the old library used to be.
right?
And
They moved those people, those graves.
now they bought the city. What's his name? Lord. He was on the city, on the cemetery, and he went and asked them, Peyton Roberts them, if they would start selling some of that land. And they started moving the people from over here. They started digging up the graves.
And that's how the city
moving
cemetery got
the
started?
The city bought that from the Roberts family.
Okay.
And I've got deeds showing
Okay.
where they bought it.
But I think what she's saying, that later on, like around the turn of the century,
Okay, but I just want to
Yeah,
let
like 100 years,
African-Americans
yeah.
let you know African
so
Americans.
in the early history of our town, the
That's
African
way-
They
American,
weren't just
before
poor
my
folks.
time.
but around the turn of the
Before my time.
century,
We wasn't poor-
up
poor
until
folks.
segregation, the African Americans predominantly were in the Dunbar neighborhood living,
Which is
And
right?
and
Which
then
is-
you had African Americans and Caucasian. I've never had to pick cotton in my life, none of my family.
And you had a credit card, but you grew up a little different.
Yeah, but everybody was out there picking cotton. It was poor folks in all races,
Right.
not just the African American
still
races.
is.
And you was look out in the cotton field, it was poor folks. I never had to pick. I never had to work.
Anybody growing cotton?
well, I didn't have to, but I enjoyed my own little money.
But I was
Right.
So I always was able to
Well,
work.
back then,
and I,
most-
and I
Most teenagers did work back then. It was unusual that you
Yeah.
didn't.
And it's still
Really?
some African Americans still own property up there on the highway, going into
Ranch Road 12.
yeah, thank you. It's still African Americans own some of that property. And what's her name? She's Hispanic. She lived next to the Peyton Roberts Cemetery. And she'll tell you that she bought her property from there. And
Who,
some of the
Ophelia?
others,
Ophelia
all along
Boston?
Ranch Road 12, were African Americans, and they'll tell you they sold it. The
The African American population has never been big. I mean, it's always been like at 4%. It's a very small number of versus
It is.
the whole population of San Marcos. Demographically, there were never huge numbers of African Americans here in San Marcos.
It seemed
Maybe
to be
more at the
declining.
early years.
Yeah, at the early years, yes. Yes.
Where'd they go?
You know, the younger generation, they move out like we moved out.
Right,
I mean, my
right.
mother moved, married again, and I wasn't raised in this area. I was raised in California. And a lot of the younger generation began to, you know, move out. My cousin and everything, because
Right.
I was an only child. My cousin was an only child.
Well, now that you're both 82 and reflecting back on your life, what were some of the major technology has changed so much. What were some of the major changes that you've seen in your lifetime? Just to the way you live.
I think for all of us, including you, we didn't have cell phones then. All in Facebook, where people share it. However, I'm not on Facebook. I'm sitting in church Sunday, and this lady was saying, "Oh, let me show you your grandchildren, my great grandchildren, at a wedding in Colorado." My granddaughter done sent all of these pictures.
The wedding happened 30 minutes ago, and here's the pictures, probably.
Yeah.
And I'm a nurse, and if I see I'm looking at those things, I go,
Because
But
growing
yeah,
up, I mean,
in
my
church.
parents talked about sitting around the radio and listening to the
Oh,
radio
yeah.
And
as a family, and you
and
had
the
family.
stories that used to come on the radio. And even when we first got a TV, my mama was a housewife. She didn't work out of the house either. And she would like to watch the stories,
So
like
fun.
As the World
Yeah.
Turned and all of those. They look forward to it, you know. And it's still
My
some of that
mama did
stuff
too.
going
She
on.
did her ironing watching the soap operas, and they had the water in the Dr. Pepper bottle, you know, with the shaker to shake the water
Right,
on your clothes.
Right. And then my mama she had a green thumb. People would come by her house and see the flowers, and they would want to buy them or whatever. She could just plant anything, and it'd come up and look really pretty.
You know, my grandmother, I told you she had her own home laundry and had women working for her and everything. So when I got back from California, she was living down the street on Valley Street, and she would have an old washing machine in the back, and she'd wash them and wring out clothes, because we were little children, and she'd be out there washing. So when I got back from California, I got, and I put her washer and dryer in the house.
Whoa, she probably had a
And she
clothesline
said-
before that.
And, a clothesline and everything. And she said, "Baby, what you doing?" I said, "Mama, Reverend Washington was the plumber. I'm having you a washer and a dryer put in the house." And there was a room back here where she was in the house. She said, "Lord, I ain't never washed in the house before." And then she got used to that washer. And she said, "Lord, it sure is nice sitting up here watching my stories while I'm washing." And then she could just put them in the dryer.
She would say that's the biggest change that affected her life.
It was a big change.
Yeah.
And then, you know,
Okay, go ahead.
when my dad first bought the house, we had an outdoor toilet back during that time. Then finally we were able to do a bathroom inside. Back in the 50s.
So that's when you got an indoor bathroom. It was all the way in the 50s.
Oh, my goodness. Mama them had that house built. Her brother built a house down on Valley Street. Because they used to live up there across the street from where I live now, across Sister Nellie's old house. And he put them a bathroom in there years ago when they moved in that new home. And my uncle was teaching. He was teaching at the university, the African American University.
In
You went
Austin,
to
the one
that.
that Rose went to. Pardon?
No,
Houston,
Prairie-
Tillotson.
Prairie- Preview.
Houston Tillotson.
Prairie View.
He
Oh,
taught
okay.
in Preview. Yeah, so he made sure that my grandmother stayed.
We all had, what is when you think back over all these years in San Marcos, what do you remember as one of the biggest things that happened in town that set the town buzzing? Like a flood or something big? Maybe not a natural disaster,
I think,
but
the
things
flood in 72, I think it was 72, when Dolores lost her 2 children. Then I
Dolores
think
Crittenden?
Yeah, remember she lived on Mitchell Street.
I had moved here then.
Somebody come to help Angel and her mama and her 2 younger children. She was working at Gary Jobco, and my oldest children was still in high school during that time, and I was living in a rental house right across from Dunbar. And Mr. James came by and he said, I think my 2 grandchildren are gone. So they did float up next to their house.
Where was that they were living when they...
On Mitchell Street. Right
Yeah,
there across from First Baptist Church on Mitchell Street.
And it flooded and they lost it?
Yeah.
How old were the children?
They were like 5 and 4, something like that. They were real young.
Well, that street used to flood a lot before
the
they built the
boat.
watershed.
Yeah, before they did the dam.
The boat overflowed. That's the reason there's no homes out now, because the homes that Dolores them lived in, they tore them down. And then they put that bridge over the creek now.
Did other people die in the flood, or just Dolores?
Just those 2. Just those 2.
And those
children.
were her only... Did Dolores have other children?
Yeah, she had 3 other girls. That was the only boy that drowned. A boy and a girl. Those was her 2 younger children. Cheryl Lee is her daughter. Well, Cheryl McWilliams, because she got
Oh,
the
okay.
Yeah.
And it used to flood
Well,
quite a
she
bit
got
down
2.
on Cheatham Street as well, where they took all those houses out and didn't rebuild down there either.
But it flooded on my street, Valley Street, and the houses across the street from me, they were all flooded out. It got up to my yard.
Did the Mitchell Center flood?
The Mitchell Center.
It's up higher.
Yeah, and the people across the street had to move, and we got out there, Jake Pickle and all of us, the Red Cross and all of us, went all along there, and it just got up to my yard.
I've seen pictures of that flood. It was a really bad one.
And the people across the street, they had to move out.
But this one that we just had has been the worst, what they say, 1900.
Yeah, because of that mess they put over there.
It was a since 1929. Well, that was the Blanco River. This flood y'all are talking about in 72 was the San Marcos River that flooded.
Well, they put that mess up down Thompson's Island, all those apartments and things.
Right.
And they caused this last flood.
So do you remember, I'm changing the subject, like they're talking now about changing Guadalupe Street and LBJ Street back to 2-way. It's 1-way now. Do y'all remember when it was 2-way before?
Oh yeah.
Talk about that. How was that? Do you think they should change it back to 2-way?
I don't
Even
think
like
so.
it is. Because we got so many students here, and with the driving, leaving.
Was it controversial when they changed it to 1-way back in the day? Wasn't that back in the 70s that they changed it originally?
So.
Yeah, it was a mess.
Politics in San Marcos has always been kind of excitable.
It's going to be exciting again.
It's always. But neither one of you gals ever wanted to run for public office. Y'all both would have been good in local public office. Never thought about it?
Well, I was going to run. I ran for school board, but I didn't make it because the woman running against me, she gave all of her people to this other guy. During that time, I was the only African American.
When was that? What year was that? Do you remember?
I don't remember
Roughly?
what year it was. I don't remember. And then Patricia Spellman, Mary Ann Williams, She was, I think Mary Ann was the first African Americans to get on the school board.
I mean, we had our first African American on city council not too long ago. That was like Earl Mosley. That was 10
scandal.
That was like 10 years ago, right? 15. I lose track of time. Do you remember any big scandals that went on?
Yeah.
You do? Like what? But we love scandals.
And you love scandals?
Yeah, you remember?
Brother almost?
No, just about San Marcos, not Earl
about
Mosley.
San Marcos. Oh, there's always something going on.
Always something going on.
Yeah.
Mostly Ollie causes all the scandals.
Uh-oh. Somebody
Ollie
said,
causes all the
no,
scandals.
Ollie, I thought Ollie would know about the scandals. Well, now we learned about your childhood. Now we know why you're a woman of strong convictions. Both of y'all are.
I love the true history.
Yeah.
I love the true history. I wrote a letter to the editor, to the Austin Statesman and the San Marcos Record. Didn't any of them print my letter. And I asked them why. They said, Ollie, it was too hot. I wrote that I'm so sick and tired of people saying President Obama, the first black president. The man is not black. I don't like to be called black. I'm beautiful brown, same color as Jesus Christ, and it's time to stop looking at the color of the skin. But anyway, I said President Obama was not the first black president. The man is mulatto. He knew who his mother and father were. They were married to each other. I don't hear you say anything about the other 5 mulatto presidents we had. Were their parents married to each other was Papa or Rolling Stone. And when either one of them put my letter and yeah, President Obama is a mulatto.
Well, I'm glad at 82 you're still keeping things stirred up, and I really enjoyed talking to you. And Rose makes a big statement too. She just doesn't carry as big of a stick as Ollie, but Rose is in there stirring things. You're still very involved in politics and.
Well, I'm in politics and education.
That's right.
I believe in education, believe in trying to get our young people educated. I do, along with Ollie, come and help me too, a Juneteenth cake auction that we give scholarship. Coming out this Sunday should be a story about our cake auction, which they didn't send nobody to take pictures this year. So
well, I've been to that and to the cobbler cook-off. Y'all keep that coming on.
We are.
I took pictures of the cake off.
Well, I can't thank you enough for your time today, and I hope you ladies keep on shaking things up in San Marcos for years to come.